Welcome to the Writer's Dream, a forum where writers are able to talk about how they wrote their books, how they publish them, and how they market them. It's also a place where people who really like to find out how a story becomes a book can listen and learn. Today our guest is Suzanne Litrel, and she is the author of the Jackie Tempo novels. And she is a mother, and she is also a social studies teacher.
Yes, indeed.
And she has written a series of books with a very interesting connection to world cultures, which is a very dear and near topic to social studies teachers'
Absolutely.
hearts, so to speak. So Jackie, can you tell us how your life is influenced, and your life as a social studies teacher and your personal life has influenced your writing these books?
And you know, so many people switch me with Jackie Tempo.
Yeah, I almost called you Jackie Tempo.
Yes, Well, the Jackie Tempo series is a perfect blend for me of my personal, professional, and academic life experiences, actually. I feel like I was driven to write these books. I grew up overseas. I was born in New York, and I lived in Huntington until I was 2 years old. And my father's job took us to Rome, to Singapore, to Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Wow.
And we came back to the United States my senior year of high school. Try that. That was interesting, from Sao Paulo. And I went to school in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I went to school at the University of Michigan. I was in culture shock, actually. I didn't want to go too far from home. And with that, I wanted to travel overseas. So my senior year of college, I bought a one-way ticket to Taiwan, and my father almost killed me. And I stayed in Taiwan for about a year. I wanted to learn Chinese and travel, get my head together before I started grad school, and I traveled through mainland China in 1989. And I was actually in Beijing a week before the Tiananmen massacre. So then came back, did grad school, came to Long Island. After 6 years in the business world, I decided to become a teacher. Really, I truly believe, and I'm sure you feel this way too, that teaching is a calling. And especially with my background, I felt social studies worked best for me. And so the global history curriculum is very, how should I say this? It's diverse, it's wide, it's deep, and in New York State, children are supposed to know quite a bit. And of course, they're assessed in 6th grade. Well, there's a local test. There's an 8th grade local test, and for the New York State level, there is a global history regents. And the kids really need to know a diverse number of topics. So,
spoken like a true teacher, but this is where a passion for travel and a passion for knowing about other people really pays off, because I think that even with all of the media that we have today, our children are somewhat insulated from other cultures.
It's very true.
So tell us how your books have brought other cultures to students on Long Island.
Well, actually, it was my students were the ones who drove me to write the books. One day I had a student in class, and I was teaching AP World History. It was my first year. It was 2005. And one of my students looked up and said, you know, Ms. Litrel, can we use your life on the global history and the AP World exam? And I said, well, no, but that's the point. This is why I tell these stories. And so that's why I was driven to write the Jackie Tempo series, first set in Ming China, because I have my master's degrees in Chinese studies, also from the University of Michigan. And then the second book is set in Brazil, where I lived, and the third is in Baghdad. Teachers are now using these books, especially this one has a wider audience at this point. I really have to work on marketing a little bit more.
Well, China's very big now.
Yes, and that's it. And I do integrate language in there, in the text itself, just common phrases, because I speak Mandarin. And so there are a number of schools on Long Island which use this. Holy Trinity uses it for its 9th grade class. They have a sort of humanities-based curriculum. Pat Med, Amityville, and some other schools. A school in Texas apparently assigned these 2 books for their summer reading.
But this is sort of the trend now in education, is to, with the core values, is to introduce children to knowledge-based material through something that's really very interesting. Who is Jackie Tempo? Tell us who Jackie Tempo is.
Well, I have been accused of being Jackie Tempo, and that is true. Probably, you know, when I think of the character of Jackie Tempo, she's feisty, she's stubborn.
How old
sometimes
is she?
Could be obnoxious, so she's me.
How old is she?
She's 15. And I think of being 15, it was a critical time in my life, and in many kids' lives, actually. It's that turning point of trying to find your identity. And it's very much a turning point for her, because she thinks she's alone in the world with the first book, and she is shipped off to her Aunt Isabel's house only to discover that, well, maybe her parents haven't been killed in a car accident. Maybe they're somewhere in time.
So it's a time travel.
Yes, it's a time travel historical fiction series.
And they go back to Chinese culture that maybe doesn't exist today, but certainly pervades the psyche of the Chinese person,
Yes.
And it's what we study about in world cultures.
Yes.
You have some very interesting characters in the book. You have John, who is, tell us about who John is. And
well, John is handsome and smart, and
what
so
else?
of course,
We have
what
to
else
have-
would you
yes,
want?
yes.
And he is a high school senior. Jackie is a sophomore, and she is taking AP World History in the class. So it's interesting because I just got an email from another AP World History teacher in Georgia, actually, and she said, you know, I'm thinking I'm going to assign the third book for extra credit, and I just want to see what resources you have. Because that's, again, this is, most 10th graders are taking AP World History. I think 75% of all students taking the exam are sophomores these days. It was originally intended for 12th graders because of the challenge of the curriculum, but the way it's played out, it's going to sophomores. So these are easy reads for AP World History students.
Yes, they are. They're very they're page turners. You want to know what's going to happen. Jackie has an aunt that she lives with, who she lives with, and because she has no parents, right? Or at least she, in the present, doesn't have any parents.
That's
but
right.
we won't say
Oh, no, wait, no.
what happens.
We can't give away the book.
And then what I love is you have an antagonist. You have Devin Pearson, who is the evil Devin Pearson, who goes through the books.
And my apologies to Devons everywhere. I had a 10th grader come up to me to say, I'm Devin, and I'm not a bad guy. So.
On reading the book, what I found was that I could see, because I'm a teacher as well, where you put the elements of Chinese culture all through the book, and you had a person like John, who was dropped into this world from a Long Island high school, being absolutely appalled at some of the aspects of Chinese culture, and enabling students actually, when they read the book, to see that different cultures are different. And your character, Mei Li, who is the Chinese girl in the story, defending and explaining, and then you have both John and Jackie behaving in a manner that the Chinese people really weren't too happy with, to show that American culture is not the culture in China. There's differences in cultures, and I think that's an awareness that's so important for kids today.
It really is, and it's an awareness not only for kids, but also for adults as well. I mean, we're living in an integrated world, more and more so. My father's experiences overseas taught him and us the value of knowing the culture. You know, General Motors ran into some problems overseas several times because of the cultural differences and the lack of awareness.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Well,
this is a skill we all need.
Yes, it's true. Would you like to read from the book? Give us some passages from the book.
Sure. Well, here's a passage. Let's see where it is. Well, here's a passage that is directly. I think we both know that we pull from our own experiences, and here's a passage that. It comes right out of my memory. I did travel the summer of 1989. My then fiance, now husband, and I traveled through mainland China. And we were actually, he's half Chinese, we were actually in search of his maternal aunt, great aunt. So we were in the city of Chengdu. And again, there's no internet, no cell phone, and nothing. And so we were trying to locate his aunt. And we ended up in a marketplace. And this is straight out of my life, but set in the 1500s. There, in the far corner of a marketplace, was a very pretty woman teetering under the weight of packages piled precariously on her back. Something in the way she moved, however, indicated that more than the heavy burden was causing her distress. She gingerly made her way toward the northeastern gate, and the crowd jostling all around her. She swayed as delicate and fragile as a lily in a strong breeze. Now, the woman that I saw was in her 80s, but still she moved with a peculiar kind of grace. And Chris pointed to me and he said, "Oh my gosh," he tapped me and he said, "Look, oh my goodness, look at that." And I clapped his hand down. I said, "Don't point." And I saw there was a woman with bound feet trying to survive in 1989. So.
And that's amazing, because I was in China in 2006, and mostly in the major cities, not too much in the countryside. I never saw anyone with bound feet.
Wow.
And the interesting thing to me was that the young people, the young females, were they all had a piece of their hair dyed red, and they all walked around doing this.
Really?
And I didn't know whether it was V for victory because of their economy or peace. I wasn't really sure. I wasn't sure which the sign was for. But it was interesting to see how much they looked like American teenagers and acted like American teenagers. So we're having, hopefully, a meeting of the cultures in some ways.
I think
so. I found that fascinating.
Yes.
So different from your experience.
Absolutely. You said 1996?
It was no, it was in 2006.
2006. I'm sorry.
So things have really moved along.
I know if I go back now, it will have been completely changed, because when I was there in 1989, and I share these stories with the kids all the time, which is why they tell me to write. Everyone was pretty much wearing standard issue wear: white shirts, blue jacket, gray pants. I mean, there was very little. And
no, it's in 2006 it really wasn't that way. People were pretty much dressed like Westerners.
Right.
The only thing that, the thing that shocked me most was the amount of vehicular traffic, car traffic on the roads, because I expected, the last thing I had heard about Beijing was that you went there and everyone was on a bicycle. Well, yes, a lot of people were on bicycles, but there was a lot of car traffic and a lot of brand new roads, a lot of infrastructure being built. But let's get back to the book. My question, because I've written a series of books too, and my heroine has similar problems. She has parental issues. Her parents aren't somewhere in the past, but she lives with an aunt, and she, her aunt is a New York City police detective, so she gets involved in, my issue is forensic science.
Yes.
So she gets involved in these criminal cases, and she uses the resources around her to solve these cases. Why do we love reading these stories? So, because your book is a page turner, it's an adventure. What is it about our stories about young people going out into the world and getting involved in danger? What is it about those stories that we love so much?
Well, first of all, I have to say that my 12-year-old loves your books.
Oh, good. Thank you.
She is a big fan of Bones, so this was the perfect story for her, and she's been bringing it to school every day.
Good.
I don't know. I think the mystery, the drama, the angst, the teenage angst. I mean, those are universal. Everyone feels at some point in their life that maybe the foundation upon which they stand isn't so firm after all, and that there's something going on behind the scenes, that there are other truths to be found. So, I tend to look at that.
The journey to find the truths, too, because we all did that.
Yes.
We all, in one way or
and
another.
we're doing it, right, Mike? I'm still on that journey.
Well, I think we all are, but I think that time in those teen years, that's a time when
it's very tough.
Some people reject the whole thing, and others of us kind of reject some things one at a time,
Exactly.
and we find our own truths.
Right.
For me, I also just loved the idea that a new world was opening.
Yes.
And these were stories about people who were getting out on their own and doing, solving their problems, finding out information. And it's just the strangeness of it, too. I always loved the books where there were people went to a different place or a different time or were completely immersed in a different situation. And I think that's exciting.
And I think I have one of my characters, let's see if I have this. I have one of my characters actually discussing this. This is on Isabel. And and she says, actually, I truly believe this, and I think this is what we're discussing. I think it's fair to say that a good book can transport us out of time and place to another world, as it were. Some books have the power to change our lives completely, and we can't imagine never having read them. And we can often pinpoint where we were and what our lives were like when we picked up such a book. So I think, at least in my case, books served as an escape. Sometimes the immediate present, especially when you're a teenager, can be very, very painful. It was extremely painful in my case.
Well, for me, books are still a means of escape. I tend to like the books that are historical fiction. I like to escape to another time and place. It's very relaxing. In fact, Fahrenheit 451.
Yes, I love Ray.
Where at the end,
Ray Bradbury.
people who survived the book burnings are memorizing books. They're walking in a beautiful park and they're memorizing books. And I think to myself, with all of the cell phones and iPads and iPhones and whatnot, how wonderful to just memorize a book and walk around with that one book, that one concept, that one beautiful idea. So I think books do that.
Yes.
And well, let's talk a little bit about the process of writing. What was the biggest challenge in writing these books?
I would say at first the challenge was time. I gave myself all sorts of excuses. I really felt driven to write these stories. And I think what really did it for me, besides my students pestering me, you should write a book, you know, your whole life story, etc. And I thought, no, I don't want to write about myself. But the high school librarian, Ursula Limpert, she was a fantastic librarian, recently retired, came in one day and said, I need you to write your books. You need to write good historical fiction. There's plenty of it out there, but she said, we need more. And so with that, I started putting pen to paper, and she was a great sounding board. And I ended up, I think you get to a point with writing where you can't stand it anymore. I knew that I would dislike myself intensely if I never wrote. And, you know, everyone has great ideas. I think just about everyone would like to write a book. But you get to that critical point where you absolutely cannot live another day if you don't start the story. So I did find that time. My father asked me to house sit one July. As a teacher, I have July off. I usually consider July my off time because August I start prepping. And so I was watching his house with my daughter, and I had 3 weeks, and he had this dog who was very precious to him, and I felt like I couldn't even leave the house. So I called up my husband. I said, I can't take this anymore. And he said, Suzanne, this is a perfect opportunity for you to write. Stop complaining and just write. So once I put myself on a schedule, then I was able to start writing. I would get up very early, from 5 to 7. Those are still my best thinking hours. I would write. But the process of writing wasn't as difficult as the raising of the child, as it were, as the production process, as marketing and so on. So
yes,
that's the challenge.
Every author will tell you the publishing was okay. The writing was great.
Yes.
The publishing was okay, and the marketing's a nightmare.
Yes.
Because today, I think you have so many opportunities, and you don't know which direction to go in. Because I know I am a retired teacher, but I work at least 5 hours every day, even on the weekends, unless I have something that I have to do on the marketing issues, and it's daunting.
Yes. Well, you can't be a wallflower in this business.
No.
I think there are people who write and then expect the heavens to open up and here's my book. It's really, you have to hoof it. And that's fair to the reader also, because there's so many people who don't know what great books are out there. So it's great if you have an opportunity to come face to face with a reader. It's a wonderful experience.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's really, that is really the nicest thing when someone says to you, I mean, I wrote my books, as you did, for a young audience, but I got an email one time from an 81-year-old woman who it was the best review I ever got. So I started to think in terms of marketing as, maybe I'm going to market these books as, these are books that mommies and grandmommies and aunties can read with their girls.
Right.
So you wrote these, did you write the whole book that summer?
I did, actually. I had started it a little bit in the spring, and then I had the 3 weeks, and I finished all but 11 pages at my dad's house. But by then I was on such a tear that I finished it at home. And it was funny because when I finished the book, I was upstairs on my husband's computer, and I came down, dinner had started, I said, I'm there, I'm almost done. Because the fun part of writing fiction is you want to see what's happening next.
Oh, sure.
I loved meeting my characters. And I came downstairs, and the whole family's eating dinner, and my husband looked at me and said, well, and I burst into tears. I'm done, you know.
Yeah, it's like giving birth.
Yes, it really is.
It really is like giving birth. And the
These are our
funny thing is
babies.
that you really do go on a journey with your
Yes,
characters.
you do.
You have an idea of where you want to go, but there's a lot of
Right.
control that they take of the story,
Yes.
which makes it fun.
They
Well,
do.
I'm hoping that someday Jackie will meet Annie. And
That would be fun. That would be
maybe
very
they
fun.
will find, a common
They have
place
to-
that they can go to and
Yes.
solve one of the world's great
think so.
problems.
I think that
that
would
would
be
be
fun.
really a lot of fun. So your favorite part was?
I do like the writing process. Once I have a chunk of time, and I love getting in the zone and seeing what happens next. That's a favorite part. There are many favorite parts. I love doing research. This was drawn, my master's degree is in Chinese studies, so I drew upon my academic background and my time in China and Taiwan. So this I was pretty much able to write without much research at all. I just had to double check one thing, which it turned out terrifically, but this is Jackie Temple and the Emperor's Seal, and there was a lost seal. And I thought afterwards, I said, gee, I wonder if that was historically correct. So I had to go back, and I was right. So it's also very interesting to see. I think once you're in that zone, sometimes you know more than you think.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
And
That's
so
true.
this one was drawn upon.
Yes, please tell us about the other
this,
two.
This one's set in Ming China, and I loved really each one of these books zeroes in on a time that hasn't been fully explored, but is explored in the curriculum, and it's difficult for kids to get a hold of sometimes, really turning points, you might say.